Hi guys! Today we'll be recapping a story called I Accidentally Saved the Male Lead's Brother. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot. Enjoy! Have you ever imagined how it feels like to be a main character? Well, probably most of us dreamt of a life from a main character's point of view. However, in this case, Charlotte Lania, a girl who lives free from any obstacles and just enjoys her ordinary life as a noble, suddenly finds herself in an opposite situation. Seems like she begins living upside down when she saves a kid's life named Theodore Heinst, who turns out to be the younger brother of the male lead. Let us witness the changing of character of Charlotte as she turns out to be the girl she never imagined she would become. Will her life change for the better, or will she regret entering the life of a main character? It all starts with a lost boy in a forest, standing there alone in the middle of an eerie forest, asking for help. He is looking for his older brother while bursting into tears. Suddenly, a lovely lady emerges, witnessing the young boy sobbing in fear. Assuming he is lost, the kind-hearted woman contemplates helping him find his family. However, her intentions shift abruptly when the boy turns to face her, revealing his clothes drenched in dark red blood. Shock and fear grip her as she realizes the child is unmistakably soaked in blood, and her eyes widen further when she spots a familiar symbol on his coat. Her astonishment deepens when she recognizes the symbol from 3 years ago. Back then, Charlotte was a character in the novel The Duke's Contract Wife. However, her narrative ended tragically as she was struck by a truck, a common occurrence in romance fantasy novels. Yet, instead of meeting an afterlife, her soul traversed dimensions and inhabited a body of a baron's daughter. Strangely, after completing the book, she never encountered any mention or appearance of her character, indicating that she would now be living a reality outside the pages of the novel. As an ordinary noble instead of a female lead who would certainly endure all the hardships that a main character could ever possess, she is beyond glad to know that she's not a villainess nor a supporting character as well. Returning to the present, where Charlotte encounters the male lead's character, she remains hesitant, but the boy becomes increasingly hysterical. Unable to ignore his distress, she finally asks him what happened. Suddenly, a man named Caesar appears and aids them in the search of the lost boy's elder brother. Charlotte embraces the frightened child, attempting to offer comfort. It becomes apparent that there was an ambush, triggering Charlotte's fear of the events foretold in the novel. Deciding to take action, she brings the child named Theodore with her. Upon their arrival, she promptly orders a doctor, leaving the maids in a state of shock and concern. Charlotte introduces Theodore to her mother, and they decide to provide shelter and protection until someone comes to claim him. Little does Charlotte realize, this marks the beginning of her unexpected journey. Meanwhile, the older brother frantically searches for Theodore, expressing deep concern and instructing his servant to find the younger boy at all costs. Frustrated and blaming himself for letting Theo go alone, he contemplates his decisions. In the midst of his turmoil, a letter arrives from Charlotte containing the news he didn't expect. Minutes later, Caesar delivers the news about the said assassination. Upon hearing it, she can't help wondering why the events seem different from the novel. According to the original novel, Theo should have died. The mystery deepens as they discover that there are no fatal injuries, but instead, traces of magic linger around the scene. Charlotte, suspecting magical involvement, instructs Sir Caesar to summon a sorcerer from the neighboring estate. However, Caesar hesitates, citing the expense of hiring a sorcerer and their lack of funds. In response, Charlotte smiles and proposes a solution. Selling her jewelry, even if it means parting with gifts from her parents. She is determined to prioritize the safety of the Lania estate with her family. Their conversation is suddenly interrupted by Theo's loud voice, and the moment he sees Charlotte, he comes running to her. He seems scared and only wants Charlotte, whom he calls his big sister, around. Charlotte grants his request, and she begins to bathe Theo, who thoroughly enjoys the refreshing experience. After the bath, Charlotte dresses him in an adorable outfit. Theo looks so adorable in those pajamas holding his stuffed toy. As the night approaches, Charlotte suggests reading a bedtime story to Theo, who shows visible excitement at the idea. Choosing a tale about a wizard and his friend Celine, with a happy ending where they reconcile after facing challenges, Charlotte reads aloud. Turning her attention to her side, Charlotte observes Theo peacefully asleep, holding on to his stuffed toy. A sense of joy fills her as she reflects on the positive impact of meeting Theo. Yet concerns linger as she notices his unease when she's not around. This unease is expected since he's surrounded by strangers, with Charlotte being the only person he trusts. In the midst of these thoughts, Charlotte recalls the tattoo she noticed on Theo's back. The realization surprises her as she learns that the Heinz family tattoos their members from a young age. Before she can delve deeper into her contemplations, Emma, one of her maids, knocks on the door with a worried expression. Upon hearing that Viscount Lotheun is in their house, Charlotte is taken aback. The Viscount's presence causes a commotion on the first floor as he actively searches for Charlotte. This unexpected visit adds tension to the once peaceful atmosphere, creating an uneasy feeling in the air. Meanwhile, Theo notices that Charlotte's gone, so he gets out of bed to look for her. Oh no, what if he gets hurt? Charlotte faces the Viscount, who stands his ground with a smug expression. He inquires about the proposal, an offer for Charlotte to marry him and become his wife to settle all debts concerning the Lania territory. Charlotte, feeling uneasy about the proposition, responds with assurance that she intends to repay all the debts over time without accepting his marriage proposal. The Viscount's disappointment becomes evident at her words. With determination in her voice, Charlotte firmly declines his offer, stating unequivocally that there is no way she would consider becoming his wife. The Viscount, caught off guard by her refusal, reacts impulsively and raises his hand as if to slap her. However, in an unexpected turn of events, Theo steps in between them to prevent the Viscount from harming Charlotte. In a surprising display, it appears that Theo, fueled by anger and a protective instinct for Charlotte, subconsciously creates a magical barrier to defend her. The Viscount screams in pain and threatens both Theo and Charlotte. He warns Charlotte about the debts, giving her only 2 days to pay. After his furious exit, Theo shares that he came looking for Charlotte because he misses her. They head to his room to sleep, but suddenly Theo collapses. Charlotte acts fast, preventing him from getting hurt. Feeling guilty, Charlotte stays by Theo's side despite the maid's suggestion to rest. Later, when talking to the doctor, there's no good news as they can't figure out why Theo collapsed. The nanny calls Charlotte with a worried, tearful voice. Unfortunately, Theo's fever has worsened and the news is grim. There's a possibility he might not make it through the night due to the severe fever. The terror on Charlotte's face grows as she hears this troubling information. No, that can't be! She rushes in, already in tears at the sight of him struggling. Theo calls to her, extending his arm to wipe her tears. Charlotte embraces him, assuring him that everything will be okay. Despite Theo's promise to protect her, her tears intensify when he doesn't respond. Overwhelmed, she cries herself to sleep beside him. When she wakes up, she finds herself next to Theo and realizes she dozed off. Thankfully, Theo's fever has improved. As Theo recovers, returning to his cheerful self, he enjoys eating his requested pudding. Suddenly, the servant informs her that Duke Heinz is in their mansion. Oh, such godly features! He looks so handsome! Duke Heinz exudes a commanding and masculine presence, surrounded by a dark aura that even intimidates the servants. The nanny advises Charlotte to retreat to her room, but she declines, feeling a sense of responsibility in the absence of her parents. With an assuring smile, Charlotte bravely descends the stairs with Theo in her arms. Theo's smile widens upon seeing his older brother. Charlotte recalls that Carlisle Heinz, Duke Heinz's second son, is Theodore Heinz's older brother. The two brothers share a reconciling hug, their embrace filled with palpable sense of longing. Theo beams with excitement in Carlisle's arms, while Charlotte quietly observes from the corner. Carlisle's sharp eyes fixate on her, leaving Charlotte stunned by his intimidating gaze. It's exactly the same as how the novel describes him, like a beast, akin to a wild wolf. Breaking the silence, Charlotte bows to show respect and introduces herself. To her surprise, Carlisle expresses gratitude and, after thanking her, instructs Theo to accompany him. With an excited tone, Theo asks Charlotte if she would join them. Oh, there's no going back now. Theo is too attached to her like a kid to his mom. However, he explains to the child that only he and Theo will be going home since Charlotte resides in that house. This prompts Theo to decline the offer to go home, firmly deciding to stay with Charlotte instead. Despite attempts to persuade him to leave, Theo keeps pushing Carlisle away because he wants Charlotte to remain with them. His distress escalates into hysterical crying and tantrums, making it challenging for them to calm him down. Suddenly, he ceases all movement, his eyes remaining wide open. He neither sleeps nor responds, staring blankly into space. I don't know, but I find this funny that he's unconscious after resisting to what he wants. Witnessing Theo's alarming condition, both Charlotte and Carlisle are deeply concerned. Charlotte, in an attempt to wake him up, shakes him vigorously. Unexpectedly, a faint light emerges after a few seconds of Charlotte holding Theo's hand. Carlisle is deep in shock that he starts holding her hand too. The same with Theo's. Carlisle's hands glow upon Charlotte's touch. Does she possess some divine powers of healing or what? Later that day, Theo eventually falls asleep, but Charlotte remains puzzled about the inexplicable light that appeared when she held both Theo and Carlisle's hands. Moments later, Carlisle enters the room looking intently at her. In her defense, she starts telling the truth that she doesn't know anything about it. Suddenly, Carlisle asks her about a phrase and a suitable person behind it. At this moment, Charlotte knows that she's in a state of emergency, a kind of signal that she might upset him with one wrong move. Magicians use their inner energy called mana to do magic, but it's a delicate job, so it's important to learn how to control mana first. However, some people, a small group, can still use magic even if they don't have mana. They're called Roseto. They got special powers from the first magicians, but there's a big problem. If their mana suddenly explodes, their body gets too hot and it makes them really sick. If they don't do something about it, they could even die. That is what happened to Theo. When Theo accidentally hurt the Viscount, Charlotte figured out her theory. If Theo is a Roseto, it would explain everything. Charlotte finally understood why the assassins didn't leave any magic signs. It's probably because Theo's mana exploded. Poor kid. He must have been very scared to see dead bodies around him that time. It also explains the blood splatters on his clothes. This also clarifies Theo's tattoo on his back, which is a pattern that represents a Roseto. Charlotte gazes at her hand, contemplating the idea that she might be a suitable person, someone necessary for a Roseto who struggles to control mana on their own. The evidence is too convincing to ignore. In this moment, Charlotte realizes that she's no longer just an ordinary noble existing on the sidelines of the story. She is now deeply intertwined with the main character's life. Carlisle proposes that until Theo learns to control his mana, Charlotte should take on the role of the Duchess in the Heinz family. OMG, this happened sooner than expected. Later that night, Charlotte remains awake, pondering Carlisle's earlier proposition. She begins to envision how her life might unfold as a Duchess. Considering the option of being a home teacher instead, Carlisle informs her that home teachers can't unite the Heinz Knights. Approaching her, the closing distance leaves her speechless and stunned. He earnestly pleads for her acceptance, expressing concern as an older brother that Theo might have another mana explosion. To sweeten the deal, he offers a fair payment. Considering her debts and the need to protect her child, Charlotte, after some contemplation, requests time to think. And so, a 5-year marriage contract is proposed, and despite the late hour, she continues to weigh the benefits of the substantial payment for herself and her family. The next day, Carlisle returns to inquire about her decision. With a smile and unwavering certainty, Charlotte accepts the offer. However, Charlotte has some conditions to set. Her first condition may sound ironic: no marriage. She clarifies that she won't agree to marriage without being engaged first. This leads them into a discussion about the engagement, as Carlisle is eager to move things forward despite the standard 1-year engagement period. In the back of her mind, Charlotte recalls the novel's plot, realizing that within a year, Carlisle may not need her anymore. According to her memory, Penelope, the novel's heroine, appears about half a year after Theo's attack, and their meeting takes place at a palace banquet. In the original novel, Carlisle tormented himself with the sadness of losing Theo. At that time, he didn't know about the Roseto yet. Lost in thoughts about what might happen, Charlotte looks down, pondering the future. Carlisle doesn't know he's a Roseto, making things even more complicated. While deep in thought, a hand touches her, bringing her back to the present. Apologizing for not paying attention, Charlotte adds another condition, which Carlisle agrees to. With everything settled, she signs the contract, but now a new worry pops up: how to convince her parents about this decision. Since her dad isn't interested in power, she knows convincing him won't be a piece of cake. An idea crosses Charlotte's mind about the national founding ceremony they both attended. They decide to create a convincing love story to support their contract. Suddenly, Carlisle takes out a necklace from his coat, showing it to Charlotte and handing it to her. This necklace is a secret between them, known only to Carlisle. Their plan is carefully thought out, and they shake hands as a final agreement. But something's been bothering Carlisle about what happened in the national founding ceremony. That evening, Charlotte's father returns home, happily greeting his daughter. Amidst their joyful bonding, the Viscount appears with a smirking face, demanding money and threatening her with increased interest. His eyes widen in shock as she hands him a check with the complete amount, including the interest. He can't believe what he's seeing, never expecting her to have such a large sum of money in just a few days. With a proud air, she displays that she's more than capable of paying him. Everyone is taken aback when the Viscount tears the check in frustration. His anger intensifies and he grabs Charlotte's father by the collar, hurling insulting words in a fit of rage. Unable to accept that Charlotte's family could pay him in full, he loses control, behaving like a wild beast and even resorting to threatening Charlotte. However, Carlisle arrives, asking what he's doing to his fiancée. Wow, is this a knight in shining armor to the rescue? The Viscount's reaction is priceless, as if he's just heard impossible news. His jaw drops and his eyes register shock. Good thing he didn't pee in his pants. Charlotte's father is equally surprised by the sudden appearance and the news of his daughter having a fiancé. His eyes widen, ready to burst with anger. Charlotte stammers, attempting to explain to her father. Then she glares at Carlisle, silently communicating through her eyes that what he did was a wrong move. Carlisle, who has been investigating the Lania family, figures out that Baron Lania is someone who deeply cares for his daughter. The three of them sit down to chat, and the Baron keeps asking questions about how Charlotte and Carlisle ended up together. He genuinely wants to know if the Duke truly cares for his daughter. Charlotte and Carlisle look at each other, trying to signal their answers and make sure they sound believable. Carlisle, who's good at acting, speaks convincingly. At home, the investigation is still ongoing about the assassination. Aside from that, he also made an investigation about the Lania family. Charlotte's family isn't that well off. They are in debt from a man who proposes marriage to the Baron's daughter as a payment. Also, it turns out that Charlotte sold her sapphire jewels just to help a kid she just met. If she was able to sell such jewels, why couldn't she use it to pay the debt? Carlisle's assistant explains that it was a gift to her coming of age, so the Baroness did all she could not to sell it. She has such a pure heart. We must protect her at all costs. Just then, Carlisle orders his assistant to search for all the sapphire jewels and to bring them to him immediately. When the assistant leaves through the door, the Duke feels a familiar pain that only went away when he held Charlotte's hands. Does this mean they're going to hold hands all the time? Oh, I'm being nosy here. Outside, we can see how happy Theo is with Charlotte. However, as they are playing, a vase falls off from the balcony towards Theo's head. Carlisle is about to intervene when Charlotte beats him to it. In a heart-stopping moment, Charlotte swoops in to shield Theo from the falling vase, her worries etched across her face. Heroically, she manages to save him, but in the process, the vase grazes her, leaving a bleeding cut. The sacrifice doesn't end there. As the room spins, Charlotte, on the brink of fainting, is caught in Carlisle's sturdy embrace. Summoning help, Carlisle swiftly commands a maid to dial the hospital. As Charlotte regains consciousness, her first sight is Theo's concerned gaze. With a reassuring smile, she assures him she's fine, soothing his worried heart. However, she clearly remembers that Carlisle held her hand for some time, confused as to why he did something like that. Perhaps he's trying to confirm her ability to calm his aching body. The following day unfolds with a touch of bittersweet creativity. Charlotte begins a whimsical farewell to her cherished maids, promising a return in half a year. With a nostalgic glance around the house, she strives to capture every detail before her departure, embracing the fleeting beauty of the moment. She then tenderly exchanges farewell with her parents, whose eyes glisten with tears as they watch their daughter prepare to leave the home they've shared. The ache of parting is softened by the understanding that they support her decision, even if they'll dearly miss their only daughter. Oh, she's surely loved in their home. I wonder how hard it is for her parents who don't have any choice but to let her go. As Charlotte turns away, tears stream down her face. Meeting with the Duke to depart, she's surprised to find the jewelry she once tried to sell. She further sobs in joy, thanking Carlisle for bringing it back to her. In the carriage, a mix of emotions is evident on her face. Alongside her is Theo, and she assures them both with a smile that they'll now be living together. She then vows to herself that no matter what happens, given how the life in the capital isn't as smooth as it is, she will definitely return to her home. Beneath a big dark sky, Charlotte's carriage quietly travels through the night, like a cozy bubble drifting through the quiet darkness. Charlotte looks out of the window while Theo peacefully sleeps in her lap. Memories pop up of the strange timings when a flower pot fell on her head, coinciding with how he almost choked on his cookies while happily savoring it. No matter how coincidental it is, it still feels strange. Charlotte wonders why these strange things always happen around Theo. Could it be because he's a kid who wasn't supposed to survive and now destiny is playing tricks on him? Even in his sleep, Theo mumbles for Charlotte, making her promise to keep him safe. Oh, what a sweet little boy! Now, Charlotte is more determined to protect him. After all, he's just a kid and not Carlisle's wake-up call. Suddenly, the carriage stops and Carlisle says they've reached an undisclosed place. Gently waking Theo, Charlotte shares the news that they're home. But when Carlisle tries to take Theo, he surprises everyone by insisting on staying with Charlotte, leaving Carlisle in a state of confusion. It's so funny how he spent day and night searching for his little brother, and now Theo's clinging to a stranger he just met days ago. Moving on, in the middle of the forest, a magical circle appears. Carlisle offers his hand to Charlotte, and when she opens her eyes again, they're in Carlisle's and Theo's home, a place wrapped in the magic of the quiet night. With a determined face, Charlotte's ready to jump to the original novel. Theo then proudly shows Charlotte his room and gives her a teddy bear from his brother. Somehow, it's familiar to her, but she didn't put much thought into it. Suddenly, Ain, a magician, comes to heal Charlotte's injury with magic. She then pats Theo's head, making him happy that she's not hurt anymore. Just then, she remembers that in the original novel, Penelope condensed her power and turns it into a magic stone. And so, Charlotte asks Ain to help her learn how to control her mana to make a protective stone. Ain happily agrees, but asks for time to talk to the Duke. As much as they want to, they could start right away, but since Theo is sleeping, holding on to Charlotte, they decide to wait until he's in bed. To not wake Theo, Charlotte goes outside. Suddenly, Emma, a concerned maid, rushes to her, guiding her to a room prepared by the Heinz family. Dresses and jewelry fill the room, surprising both Charlotte and Emma. Emma is particularly enamored with the room, finding things she likes. However, something catches Charlotte's eye, and despite Emma, whether she's happy about it or not, it becomes evident that Charlotte seems burdened. For her, it's such a waste given that Penelope will introduce herself soon. Their relationship with Carlisle is just a contract, so Charlotte feels burdened about it, leading her to step outside for a moment. Charlotte seeks information about Carlisle from the butler, Robert, but he's occupied with Carlisle's assistant, Lord Chase. Still, she asks Robert to inform her if they'll be back at the mansion. Also, she expresses her desire to see the Saintess soon, hoping to uncover the cause of Theo's misfortunes. Expressing her wish for Theo's and the Duke's happiness, Charlotte surprises Robert. He assures her he'll make arrangements for her to meet the Saintess within a week. Suddenly, a lady named Irina Rayner approaches Charlotte, introducing herself and offering assistance to tour around the mansion. Irina manages the family on behalf of the vacant mistress, adding a new dynamic to the unfolding situation. She takes Charlotte on a tour, to which she curiously thinks about distinct interactions from those with Lord Chase. Irina senses Charlotte's thoughts, revealing that she and Chase are a married couple. You got me there for a moment. I thought she's going to be a wicked villain to our lovely Charlotte. The revelation shocks Charlotte, who hadn't imagined Irina's marital status. Irina in turn points out Charlotte's own unspoken marriage. The conversation shifts to Charlotte's meeting with Carlisle, and Irina, curious about the Duke's personality, offers to help Charlotte understand him better. In Carlisle's room, bloodied hands hint at a mysterious event. Chase proposes eliminating the last piece of evidence, but Carlisle dismisses the idea, stating the person knows nothing, so he won't care if he kills him or not. While contemplating in his chair, Chase reveals that there's a traitor among the employees. Otherwise, his destination wouldn't be exposed. Chase suggests asking for Charlotte's help, but Carlisle firmly says no. Even though Chase's opinion is reasonable, somehow he doesn't like putting her in danger that would greatly affect Theo's life at stake. Is that it, or is there more to it? It's too early to judge now, but what do you guys think? As soon as Chase leaves, Carlisle feels his body getting pretty exhausted, like a terrible headache that's been going on forever. However, he remembers holding hands with her can soothe the pain. As much as he wants to hold her hand, he thinks she must be asleep in her room by now. Still, he's concerned about Charlotte's well-being, so he heads to her room to check on her. Carlisle is about to know, but then he hears Emma going out from Charlotte's room. Emma wonders if there were any footsteps. Hiding, the Duke breathes a sigh of relief, feeling a bit nervous about facing Charlotte. On a rainy day, Theo curiously asks why everyone's wearing black. Charlotte comforts him, reminding him of the night they're saying goodbye to. Then, they go to the cemetery where Carlisle and everyone else are for the knight's funeral. Carlisle stands by the knight's coffin, soaking wet in the rain and seemingly not too emotional. Since he was young, he was taught to hide emotions. That's why he's able to stand there like it's nothing. However, that is not the truth. Even Charlotte can tell that he looks so sad. I somehow feel bad for him. He's bottling it all inside with no one to talk to. Just then, Charlotte and Theo arrive, and Theo innocently asks if the knight is asleep. Ignorance is really bliss. Carlisle then advises Theo to say goodbye. Noticing Carlisle's lack of expression, Charlotte understands that he can't let out his emotions as easily as others do because no one wants to offer their sympathy too. He can't expect comfort from others if it isn't a command. Of course, he doesn't want that either. This time, Charlotte offers him her handkerchief, saying it's to shield from the hot sun, even though it's raining. Carlisle grabs Charlotte's hand where the handkerchief is, probably trying to soothe the lingering pain within himself. However, he's shocked to see a familiar pattern embroidered on the handkerchief, so he asks if she personally made it, to which she positively responds. Carlisle quickly leaves for his office, saying that he'll just wash it before returning the handkerchief. In his office, he immediately pulls out the drawer, only to find another handkerchief with the same design. The question is, if he got it from Charlotte, when did they meet? And why is he keeping it all this time? Days later, Theo and Charlotte share muffins. Charlotte thinks about why Carlisle took her handkerchief but didn't use it, though she decides not to dwell on it. When Theo asks about learning magic, Charlotte says he already had a session the day before. Theo happily remembers his magical lesson, and he praises himself as the best. Suddenly, a red-haired woman named Celine, Charlotte's escort, walks in. Celine brings a box of sweets to impress Theo and Charlotte. Even though Theo is a bit scared, Charlotte encourages him to thank Celine for the treats. Celine is getting fond of the little kid, who's obviously enchanted by his adorable side. Then, Celine mentions Theo's brother and suggests watching him training in the gym. At the gym, they watch Carlisle gracefully defeat his practice partner. Oh, God, as if the sun's not enough to set the temperature higher. It's so hot in here, guys. Carlisle notices Charlotte, wondering why she's around. God, the way he stares makes my knees wobble. Just kidding, guys. Theo excitedly waves at his brother, and Carlisle, wiping away his sweat, approaches them. Charlotte, taken by Carlisle's presence, wonders if his shoulders are as broad as ever. Carlisle just stands tall, his posture exuding confidence and strength. His eyes, deep and expressive, seem to hold a wealth of experiences. Beneath a well-defined brow, those eyes reveal a mix of determination and a hint of mystery. His hair, though messy as sweat trickles down, frames his face, adding a touch of sophistication to his overall appearance. Before she can even respond, Celine interrupts, asking if Charlotte is feeling hot, noticing her cheeks turning red. Charlotte denies it, claiming it's nothing unusual. I can't with Carlisle's smirk. What about my heart, sir? Carlisle then lifts Theo, and Theo expresses their wish to see Carlisle fencing. Carlisle suggests Charlotte to move into the shaded area to avoid the heat. Charlotte is flustered, and Celine playfully teases her about feeling hot. Then the fencing spectacle begins, captivating Charlotte as she watches from up close. Carlisle hands Theo a stick to mimic fencing, and he energetically swings it around. In a near slip, both Carlisle and Charlotte instinctively reach out, their hands accidentally brushing. Suddenly, a wooden sword hurtles toward Theo. In a quick reaction, Carlisle grabs Celine's swords to deflect the flying wooden sword. Charlotte, worried for Theo, suggests sending him to the Saintess promptly. Carlisle promptly arranges for a carriage to the temple. Along the journey, he questions Charlotte about the urgency. Charlotte, unable to reveal the true reason that in the original novel that Theo should have died, simply mentions her concern for Theo. Upon arriving at the temple, Charlotte becomes nervous. Inside, she is captivated by a glass pane depicting the goddess of destiny. One untangles the thread, the other weaves fate on the thread, and the other one who judges one's fate. Suddenly, a servant of the goddess Teresa introduces herself, catching Theo's fascination. He is even calling her Angel. So cute. However, as soon as Teresa glances at Charlotte, she can't believe what she sees. Charlotte, on the other hand, is rather confused about what she's referring to. Charlotte, feeling a weird vibe, asks Teresa if something's wrong. Teresa, trying to brush it off, says she's just mistaken, leaving Charlotte confused. Now focusing on little Theo, Teresa asks for his hands to give him a blessing. She kisses Theo's forehead and he suddenly dozes off, sleeping like a baby. Charlotte screams, but Teresa assures her that he's asleep and will be better when he wakes up. Carlisle, carrying the sleepy Theo, expresses his gratitude to Teresa. After that magical moment, Teresa insists Charlotte should get a blessing too. Asking for an audience alone in a room, Teresa's gentle expression turns into something more serious. She stares at Charlotte like she's trying to read her mind. In a mysterious tone, Teresa reveals that when she checked Theo earlier, she found out that his string of fate was almost cut, explaining as to why strange things always happen to the kid. Shocked, Charlotte asks if Theo's okay. Teresa explains more about the magical threads and how she strengthens it with the blessing of the goddess, making Charlotte feel a bit better. But the conversation takes a strange turn. Teresa, seeming like she knows some cosmic secrets, asks Charlotte about why she's in their world. At this point, Teresa knows that Charlotte's string was also cut off and reconnected to another string with a different color. Also, the present Charlotte isn't the original one, and the original soul now ascends to the goddess. Charlotte has no other choice but to tell the truth. 3 years ago, she died in a traffic accident that happened in another dimension. She lost consciousness after the car hit her, but when she woke up, she was already in this world. Perhaps the real Charlotte also ended her life at the same time. After telling her story, Charlotte thinks she won't believe it, but Teresa assures her it's their little secret. Turns out, Teresa just got curious as to why she shows up in their world, but maybe the goddess has another reason for it. As a sign of trust, Teresa gives Charlotte a blessing with a gentle kiss on her hand, also making her string stronger. However, Teresa warns her to be careful because her string of fate is made up of 2 strings. She'll never know when the 2 strings will split. Does this mean her death? Shock and fear dawn on Charlotte, but as she opens the door wider, Teresa disappears without a trace like a mysterious fog. Back in the carriage, Carlisle warns Charlotte to stay put because there's trouble. Not knowing how to calm herself while also comforting the child, Charlotte shakingly sings a children's song, all while her body shivers in fear. Oh God, why does this always happen to them? After some time, Carlisle manages to protect them from danger and safely takes them home. When Emma asks if Charlotte's okay, out of the blue, she collapses. Charlotte lies on her bed, trapped in a nightmare, desperately calling for help in her sleep. Carlisle rushes to her side, comforting her by gently holding her hand. This simple gesture brings solace to Charlotte, who gradually eases into a more restful sleep. Carlisle, concerned about the cause of Charlotte's distress, reflects about all the recent events which are too much for her. Returning to his office, Carlisle summons his trusted aides, Celine and Chase, to discuss the recent raid. Carlisle identifies 3 maids: Jessie, who works in the kitchen, Ellie, employed in the laundry room, and Hazel, a lady's maid, as potential spies who keep feeding information to the trained assassins who raided the carriage and Theo. What could be in this innocent child that all these assassins want? He then orders further investigation into these 3, suspecting their involvement in the recent disturbances. Despite Chase's suggestion to involve Charlotte in their affairs, Carlisle insists on keeping her out of harm's way. He emphasizes that, regardless of the situation, Charlotte should not be entangled in their covert operations. He's rather concerned. How did the heartless Duke turn out this way? As the meeting concludes, Celine contemplates the difficulty of spying on the maids. Charlotte, sensing something is amiss, approaches Celine. In a quiet corridor, Charlotte proposes a walk outside in the sunny weather with Theo. Celine offers assistance in order to protect her, all while observing the potential servants in the hall. Upon reaching Charlotte's room, Charlotte discloses her suspicion about the 3 maids. Celine initially denies it, but Charlotte, perceptive and determined, coaxes the truth from her. Celine is too stunned to deny it any longer. She clearly didn't expect Charlotte to be this smart. Understanding the intricacy of the situation, Charlotte expresses her willingness to help uncover the spies. Charlotte acknowledges Carlisle's hesitancy in sharing such matters with her, realizing they aren't yet close enough for him to fully trust her. Celine, on Carlisle's behalf, emphasizes his concern for Charlotte's safety. Even for a professional assassin like her, she can still sense something romantic going on. How cute. Determined, Charlotte vows to keep the revelation a secret. Celine acknowledges that Carlisle would be displeased if he knew Charlotte was privy to such information. Charlotte, showing resilience, assures Celine that she won't betray the trust. Celine, seeking assistance, proposes involving Emma as a spy. In order to learn the world of servants, one must be used. Following Charlotte's lead, Emma innocently asks Ellie for a favor. Emma, craftily executing her role, approaches Ellie in the laundry room and points out a stain on Charlotte's dress. She informs Ellie that Charlotte plans to visit Legis Street with Theo and requests her to wash the dress promptly. Ellie, confident and willing, assures Emma that she'll handle it with care. Before leaving, Emma emphasizes the need for secrecy, as the outing is meant to be a surprise. Moving on to the kitchen, Emma finds Jessie and assigns her the task of preparing a meal box for Charlotte. Emma explains that it's a surprise for the Duke, and Jessie, skilled in the culinary arts, promises to whip up a delightful meal in no time. As with Ellie, Emma urges Jessie not to share the news with anyone. In the pursuit of completing the surprise, Charlotte engages with Hazel, seeking advice on where to buy clothes for the Duke. Hazel recommends a store on Ruchez Street and gladly agrees to keep the surprise under wraps. Once Hazel leaves, Emma converses with Charlotte, who commends her for her dedicated efforts. Emma expresses concern about the risks involved, but Charlotte reassures her, confident that Ain will lend assistance if needed. To divert attention and ensure their safety, Charlotte employs a clever tactic, creating a decoy of Theo using a teddy bear wrapped in cloth. With the help of Ain's magic, Charlotte ventures out with the decoy, awaiting the assassin's moves. When Charlotte is transported back to the mansion, Theo greets her with a warm hug. Charlotte is confident to successfully complete the first phase of their plan. Now, they await news about the 3 carriages that have been dispatched to different locations. Turns out, she's not someone to mess with. As anticipated, the first carriage falls victim to a raid by spies, but the well-coordinated efforts of the knights foil their plans. Celine promptly reports the successful counteraction to Carlisle, who, intrigued, inquires about the information gathered from the captured spies. The discovery of the traitor among the maids sends shockwaves through Carlisle's household, as Ellie is revealed as the culprit, driven by the need to support her ailing siblings. It's always those who are desperate to support their loved ones. Why can't people just help without letting them do such grievous things? Still, Carlisle seeks to unravel the deeper layers of this conspiracy, turning to Celine for information. Celine notices a distinctive pattern on the assassin's body, a mark resembling the poisonous plant known as the Hisans flower. Carlisle, recognizing the mark as belonging to the notorious Dayros Guild, understands that their involvement goes beyond mere theft to include assassination. Determined to confront the source of this threat, Carlisle instructs Celine to lead an immediate expedition to the Dayros Guild's base. Upon arrival, the Duke and Celine set fire to the Guild's stronghold, a brutal but necessary move to dismantle the threat. Despite their attempts to extract information from the leader of the Guild, he remains tight-lipped, refusing to disclose the identity of the mastermind behind the attacks. In a defiant act, the assassin points out how Carlisle keeps holding grudges before he faces his death. Returning with documents seized from the base, Celine discloses to Carlisle that Charlotte is aware of the situation. Anxious about Charlotte's safety, Carlisle rushes to the mansion and to her room. Before he can knock, Charlotte opens the door, surprised at the Duke's presence. He notices a bloodstain on his wrist, so he hastily conceals it behind his back. He then confronts her about the plan to interfere with the carriage, a revelation supposedly disclosed by Celine. Bewildered, Charlotte denies any involvement, expressing astonishment at Celine's statements. Carlisle, deeply concerned for her safety, emphasizes the potential consequences of failure and inquires about Theo's welfare. Charlotte, realizing her oversight, apologizes, pledging to be more cautious moving forward. Carlisle, sighing in understanding, acknowledges the gravity of the situation. In an attempt to make amends, Carlisle asks how he can repay her for the inconvenience. Without hesitation, Charlotte requests access to Carlisle's personal reading room. The following day, she ventures into the designated space, discovering a specific book. However, upon opening it, she didn't anticipate the contents inside. She can't read a single thing! Charlotte finds herself asking for Sir Ain's assistance when she cannot read the book written in the ancient language. However, Ain refuses to translate it for her. Since the book belongs to the Duke's personal reading room, he cannot simply divulge its contents. Still persistent as ever, she asks how she may be able to read it. Aside from Ain, Duke Carlisle himself is able to read the ancient language after being taught from a young age. The only way for her to know its contents would be to ask the Duke to read it to her. Okay, I'm starting to like where this is going. Mouth agape, she is astounded at the idea, but before she can press further, Theo arrives and interrupts her and Ain. As Charlotte practices her magic, she senses the mana emanating from within her. However, she is not able to completely wield it. Sensing Charlotte's distress, Theo places a hand on her stomach. Suddenly, Theo wields the surrounding magic almost as if it were the easiest feat. Ain encourages her not to lose hope, for she too will be able to sense the mana more clearly in the future. Later that night, Charlotte intercepts Carlisle as he arrives. He's the only person who could tell her of the book's contents. She really is serious about getting the book translated. Hearing her, Carlisle admits that he knew the book was written in an ancient language. Leading her into the reading room, he agrees to read the book to her. As he reads through the book, Charlotte's interest falls on the symbol of the Roseto. She remarks that it is the same symbol that adorns Theo's body. At this point, both shift their conversation to Theo's magical abilities. Being born as a Roseto, Theo has always been able to activate his mana even before turning a year old. As their conversation progresses, Charlotte's interest shifts to finding a book related to the Destined One. However, being alone with Carlisle in the library means that she has difficulty focusing. Girl, I can't blame you, just look at him! But she loses her focus even more when he suddenly appears closely behind her. Carlisle appears behind Charlotte in close proximity. Face to face with each other, Charlotte blushes and closes her eyes at how close he is getting. But suddenly, her nervousness is dispelled when all he does is reach for a book behind her. Oh, come on! The romantic suspense was almost at its peak! Grabbing the book, Carlisle brings it back to their table where he reads its contents to Charlotte. He begins by telling her all about the Destined One. It turns out that the Destined One is a person who overcame death. Once this happens, the person's body changes wherein it is capable of suppressing mana. Without thinking much of it, he brings up Charlotte's terrible fever 3 years ago. He deduces that perhaps she became the Destined One after her life-threatening experience. She ponders his words carefully. As soon as she became the Destined One, Theo had managed to arrive at Rainier Manor. Could this all be a coincidence, or is fate playing a game on all of them? Ceasing their reading, Carlisle hovers his arm for Charlotte to take as they make their way back to their separate quarters. As they walk hands in hand, she wonders if it was also inevitable for her to have met Carlisle. The next morning, Charlotte and Theo spend time with Irina and her son Danny. While both children eat, she remembers an earlier conversation with Celine. Celine informs her that the people behind the recent attacks threatening Theo's life is Deiros, a guild of mercenaries harboring a grudge against the Heinz family. Geez, don't they have a conscience to target a child just because of a grudge? Seeing the worried look on Charlotte's face, Celine reassures her that the threat has been dealt with accordingly. Additionally, Celine mentions that Carlisle worries for Charlotte, especially if she might be put in danger because of her attempts at being involved in the matter. He really does care a great deal for her. Their conversation is cut short without even getting to inquire more about Celine's last statement. As everyone begins to eat, she notices Theo developing a picky attitude toward his food. How could he throw away food so easily like that? Even if they are dislikable vegetables, it's still not a reason to easily cast them away. Suddenly, an idea springs to her mind. She will teach Theo a lesson, and what better way to do it than letting Theo grow his own vegetables? Robert, the butler, listens to Charlotte's idea of immersing Theo in farming experiences. However, with such a rigorous task like that, he advises her to wait for Carlisle's approval. But with Carlisle's busy schedule lately, it would be difficult to meet him freely. Charlotte doesn't let this dampen her spirit, so she eagerly awaits his return. As the day grows later and later, she realizes that the sun is about to rise, but he still hasn't returned. Fortunately, as if the world heard her pleas, Robert comes in to inform her that the Duke has recently just returned. She doesn't want to delay anything, so she hurriedly makes her way to the Duke's workspace to ask him about her idea. When she knocks, Carlisle is surprised to see her. I mean, I'd be surprised too. It's already late after all. Charlotte finds the atmosphere extremely awkward as they sit across from each other. There's something about the deafening silence that makes her uncomfortable. Or maybe it's his piercing gaze that's boring right through her? I would start melting like an ice cream if he stared at me like that. Carlisle is first to break the ice. However, when Charlotte looks around and sees his workspace swamped with papers, she decides to delay her sharing for a little while. She realizes that he must have been too busy with all this piled up on his plate. Did he even have time to eat? Out of the blue, she shares that she is hungry and she invites Carlisle to have a meal with her despite the late hour. Hearing this, he complies and asks Robert to prepare something simple for them. While waiting for their food, she brings up her idea of immersing Theo in farming. Aside from it being fun, it will teach Theo values and hopefully will dispel his pickiness of food. Pondering on her suggestion, Carlisle doesn't have any problems with it, so he agrees at once. Anything for her, of course. He even supports it so much to the extent that he will let the gardeners prepare for her plan as well. Just as they finish their talk, Robert arrives with their meal. The two eat in silence, with Charlotte feigning hunger the entire time. When she finishes, she bids him a good night and leaves him to his work. Carlisle isn't an oblivious person, so when Charlotte leaves a hefty portion of food on her plate, he quickly realizes that she staged this entire dinner, just so she can make sure he was eating well despite his business. Looking at the now empty room, he acknowledges that just moments earlier he had been happy. But all of a sudden when she's gone, it feels empty. Since when had he been feeling this way? It's so obvious he's starting to like her. At the crack of dawn, Charlotte awakes to the sound of her room door opening. She is shocked when Theo suddenly bounces on her with excitement. Despite the early hour, his surge of energy for farming is already at its peak. I really love how enthusiastic of a child Theo is. He's so cute. Trying to calm him down a bit, she offers to wait it out, to sleep with her for the time being. As soon as the sun would rise, then they'd go farming. That morning, Theo and Charlotte immediately make their way to the garden. When he steps foot in the garden, he quickly inspects the seeds they had planted a day before. To his surprise, the seedlings actually grew overnight. Seeing his happy smile, Charlotte decides that her and the gardener's efforts were worth it. Turns out, the day they planted the seeds, Charlotte had asked the gardeners a favor. She knew that Theo was too excited and that perhaps he'd be sad to know that seeds don't grow overnight. Thanks to the gardeners who replaced each seed with a seedling during the night, Theo is able to showcase a smile on his face upon seeing the little seedlings. That must have taken a lot of effort to replace each seed. Later that afternoon, Carlisle comes to the garden searching for Theo. When he finds him eating tomatoes with Charlotte, the sight before him reminds him of a distant memory. Long ago, his mother used to roam the garden carrying a baby, Theo. Back then, having his mother doting on Theo was some of the most peaceful days he'd had. Things had not been the same ever since she passed. For some reason, it was almost as if spring had died away with their mother. I can't imagine how much he must have grieved for her. But just when he thinks he will never see spring again, Charlotte comes into view. As Theo runs to him and offers to give him fresh tomatoes, all he can focus on is her. Looking at her, he feels happy but lonely at the same time. He moves closer to Charlotte and caresses her hair with his fingertips. She looks at him with wide eyes, but all he can think about is wanting to hold her tight so that she won't go away. Not now, not ever. Ants are surely coming after Carlisle because of how sweet he is. Relationship progress, y'all! A surge of blush can't help but make its way to Charlotte's cheeks as Carlisle keeps holding onto her hair. Once more, she calls his name to gain his attention. Hearing her, he snaps out of his current state. He steps away and uses a leaf attached to her hair as an excuse. This Duke sure can be lame. As he leaves the garden, Charlotte takes a moment to recover from that breath-hitching moment. How could such a wholesome and romantic interaction vanish in the span of seconds? At dinner, Theo proudly shares the peas he grew. It seems that immersing Theo in farming really did help him overcome being picky. While everyone dines, Charlotte can't help but wonder how the Duke found the time to eat with Theo. Could it be that he actually listened to her words the night before when she suggested that he eat with his brother more often? Pushing back these thoughts, she shakes her head. There's no way he would listen to her, right? He's probably doing all this for Theo's sake. Charlotte, if only you knew how he really felt. When dinner ends, Carlisle excuses himself early so that he may attend to work matters. But it seems that Charlotte is stopping him. Grabbing his hand with so much urgency, this gives her Carlisle's undivided attention. The way she grabbed him was almost as if she didn't want him to leave. Not knowing why she did it in the first place, she tries to ease the situation by giving him a heads up about tomorrow's menu. Back in her room later that night, she receives a letter from her brother Isaac. It takes her a while to open the letter out of anxiety about its contents. What could her brothers have written to her? Reading the letter, she finds that her brothers are in turmoil at her situation. Although they are proud of how she was quick to handle the conflicts while they were away, they still couldn't wrap their heads around her engagement. Ah, yes, typical brothers being protective of their little sister. How cute. Continuing further, she reads that her brothers want to meet with her at a cafe downtown. Had the circumstances been different, she wouldn't hesitate to meet with her brothers. However, she has to look after herself now so she's not to endanger Theo as well. With determined resolve, Charlotte writes back to Isaac that she's not going to their meeting place. However, it will be them who will go to her at Heinz Mansion. The following day, two blue-haired men set foot on the Heinz Mansion. The Rainier brothers have arrived to meet their sister. The Rainier brothers, Isaac and Jake, appear to be calm and composed individuals. But looks and reality really do fool people because suddenly, Jake is making a commotion at the mansion. Screaming his lungs out, he truly believes that Charlotte is being held against her will. When Isaac has enough of him, he asks Jake to calm down. Just in time, Charlotte walks out to greet her brothers before Jake can make a bigger scene. Inside, Jake continues raging about his sister's engagement. If he could call his sister foolish in all its synonyms, he probably would have done so by now. LOL, he's so mad at her! When Jake reminds her of her age, Charlotte doesn't back down. She reminds him that it isn't unusual for ladies her age to get engaged. Hearing this, the two begin to squabble. This is why brothers and sisters are like cats and dogs. Theo approaches the trio to come into Charlotte's defense. As Theo tries to get Jake to stop yelling at Charlotte, it seems he gets caught up squabbling with him instead. Finally, Isaac intervenes and hands Theo a box of expensive chocolates. Only then does Theo agree when Charlotte asked him to stay with Emma for a while. Alone with her siblings once more, she begins to explain to her brothers how she and Carlisle first met. Although unbeknownst to them, she is actually recounting a story of how she and a stranger met one fateful day. It was a rainy day at the Capitol during the National Founding Ceremony. With her brothers being knights, it was inevitable that Charlotte was left alone sometimes. While she was separated from her brothers, she took shelter from the rain inside a gift shop where a kind lady offered for her to come in. Shortly after, a man who wears a hood came to the store. According to him, he sought a gift for his younger brother who was a year old. Helpful as ever, she assisted him in picking out the right gift. Eventually, she settled on a cute brown teddy bear and offered it to the man. With no questions asked, the man took and paid for it. But when he left, she found herself running after him in the pouring rain. The sky was still gloomy as the rain continued to pour, but still, she persisted in running after the man. When she caught up with him, she quickly offered her handkerchief. She hoped that the handkerchief would help wipe away the rainwater. Looking back and forth between Charlotte and the handkerchief, the man finally took it from her. With one last wholehearted attempt, she told him that everything will be okay. As she saw the man leaving, she pondered on the words she truly wanted to tell him. She couldn't be sure, but it felt like he was holding back tears. She wanted to cheer him up and tell him to cry it out. But then again, how could she, a stranger, offer comfort to someone she barely knew? Ending her walk down memory lane, she snaps herself back to reality with her brothers. Despite her recounting how she and the Duke met, Jake doesn't believe a single bit of it as he continued to rage. I get that he's protective over her, but if he only saw how much the Duke treated Charlotte right. Finally, having had enough of Jake, she asserts herself and admits that she truly does like the Duke. This makes Jake pause from his fit. Hearing this, Isaac gets up and acknowledges what his sister just said. At the end of the day, it is Charlotte's choice to stay, but in the event that she wishes to return to her family, they'll gladly welcome her back. As her brothers motion to leave, Isaac mentions that they'll be seeing each other soon for the upcoming Kung Fu competition. The following day, Irina and Charlotte spend time at the greenhouse as Theo and Danny play with the plants. Inquisitive as ever, Irina asks why she's embroidering all of a sudden. Charlotte heartily responds that she's embroidering handkerchiefs as gifts for her brothers during the Kung Fu competition. How sweet of Charlotte to do that! Hearing this, Irina also inquires if she is making one for the Duke. Considering the Duke isn't taking part in the competition, Charlotte didn't think she would need to give him one. When their topic shifts to the coming of the competition, she tells Irina that she won't be going. She has to stay with Theo and watch over him. Bringing him to the competition would be unthinkable too. After all, she can't be too sure that all the threats endangering him are eliminated. Oh no. I can't imagine how many accidents could happen if Theo were to be out on such a big event. Always being persistent, Irina tells Charlotte she'll help. Soon enough that evening, she finds herself dining privately with Carlisle next to her and Irina across from them. What on earth is Irina up to? It's been a long time since Carlisle has dined with Irina. Naturally, he's curious if there's a reason for it. As soon as they begin to eat, Irina asks the Duke about his plans for the founding ceremony. He answers that he plans to drop by to encourage the knights, and that's it. Afterward, he would go back to review more paperwork. Hearing this, Irina reacts abruptly. How could he tend to work during such a festival? For sure his fiancée would be lonely. She openly suggests to Carlisle that he should be spending time with Charlotte, since this is the first Founders' Day they'll be spending together since they reunited. As Charlotte listens to Irina, she tries to reassure her that she'll be fine. However, she is taken aback when she hears Carlisle agreeing to Irina's suggestions. Yes! Now that's our Duke right there! Don't let her be lonely! Satisfied with her efforts, Irina considers her job done, seeing as how she managed to get the Duke to spend time with his fiancée. As the two women walk in the hallways, they are interrupted by a blue-haired maid, Hazel, who takes great interest in the pattern on Charlotte's handkerchief. She tells her that she's seen the exact same pattern on a handkerchief the Duke had been treasuring since a long time ago. He even made sure that Annie, his attending maid, would wash the handkerchief carefully. Could it be the same handkerchief that she gave the hooded man 2 years ago? Before matters could escalate, Irina stops Hazel in her tracks. After all, she doesn't want Charlotte to get hurt if the Duke had been keeping another woman's handkerchief all along. Shortly after, Irina barges into Carlisle's office and begins to berate him for treasuring another woman's handkerchief all this time. Had she not heard it from Charlotte and Hazel, she would have been unaware of the matter. Shocked, Carlisle asks how she and Charlotte could have possibly known about the handkerchief. Storming out, Irina can't believe Carlisle was entertaining another woman 2 years ago. As she leaves, she yells that she will never help him if Charlotte decides to break off their engagement. The following day, Charlotte and Theo ready themselves to go out and watch the fireworks. Unexpectedly, despite his busy schedule, Carlisle is also coming along. As they head out to the festival and fireworks, Charlotte wonders if their outing today will bring any changes for her and Carlisle. It should, though. After all, spending time together would bring them closer. In the midst of a busy town, Carlisle, together with Charlotte and Theodore, are having a great time enjoying themselves. Smiles are painted on their faces, especially on the young Theodore, who seems to be fascinated with all these things. However, despite the happiness that they're feeling, there seems to be something that's bugging Charlotte. She still questions herself if the man she met 2 years ago was really Carlisle. She still can't be sure because that man was wearing a hood. But instead of thinking too much about it, she forced herself to enjoy their time together. They enter the store that Theo pointed at, and she meets a very familiar lady. The lady seems to be very happy to see her, but then her face suddenly goes sour the very moment she sees Carlisle and Theo. She asks Charlotte if she's married to him, which Charlotte denies. In the middle of the conversation, a commotion happens. Someone got pickpocketed and the thief's on the run. Carlisle instantly excuses himself and dashes to get the thief. The lady offers Charlotte and Theo to stay in the store for a while they're waiting for Carlisle. There, the two of them start talking, and the lady asks about her relationship with Carlisle, to which she said that he's just someone she knows and that she's taking care of Theo since he seems to be so fond of her. Charlotte also shares that she's planning to go to Barony of Rania, but the lady seems to be so shocked about it that she tries to stop her from going. She says that the man who purchased a teddy bear from Charlotte came back to the store last winter looking for her, but the lady told him that she didn't see Charlotte. Charlotte asked her if she knew anything about him, but the lady shook her head. She tries to ask the man, but he leaves without answering her. The man seems suspicious of the lady. 2 years ago, she thought that he was wearing a hood because it was raining, but the second time he came back, his face was covered as well. In the middle of their conversation, Carlisle arrives, so Charlotte immediately informs Theo that it's time for them to go. She thanked the lady, but before she can even go, the lady asks if she's interested in meeting her son, but Carlisle suddenly told her that it won't happen because they're engaged. The lady is in shock. She completely thought that Charlotte is single since she said that he's just someone she knows. While walking, Charlotte can't help but get upset with Carlisle because of what he did. But what can she do? It already happened, and Carlisle felt like it was necessary for him to say. They then sit on the grass while looking at the bright stars as they're waiting for the fireworks. Charlotte's looking at Theo, who's peacefully waiting. He's the one who's so excited to see the fireworks, but he fell asleep. Suddenly, the beautiful fireworks display starts. Charlotte's eyes are full of amazement looking at it. Carlisle faces her and hands her a handkerchief, and though surprised, her suspicions are all true. The man whom she met 2 years ago is right in front of her. It's Carlisle! The sky was dark and gloomy, like it was going to rain any minute. That day, an inexplicable, ominous feeling was filling Carlisle with dread. how come a sad premonition is never wrong? It seems like he ran out of mana because he couldn't take the news he just heard. His mother wouldn't make it past that fall. This made him think about Theo. It felt like he was being crushed. Theo's just an infant who couldn't even utter the word mama yet. How was he supposed to explain the goodbyes to him? The thought of Theo somehow made him walk into a toy store, and there he saw Charlotte, whose face was full of happiness. Her soft, friendly voice seemed to possess a strange power, a power that made him open his mouth without realizing it like magic. The moment he exits the store, Charlotte calls him and offers him a handkerchief, telling him that it will all be okay soon. It felt strange for him when she uttered those words. It was as if his turbulent heart and mind immediately felt at peace. In that handkerchief, he felt the warmth of the person who handed it to him. She stood in the rain to comfort him when she didn't even know him, and with that, he thought that she's such a strong and kind woman. Under the beautiful fireworks, Carlisle softly looks at her in the eyes as he confesses that when she handed him her handkerchief at the funeral, Carlisle realized that Charlotte is the woman that he met 2 years ago, and he's been longing to see her. Charlotte's cheeks turn red as she confesses that she also thought of him on rainy days, and that she wanted to see him again as well. Carlisle's eyes widened when she said that, while the fireworks lit up the whole sky with a loud bang, and a sound that resembled an exploding flame echoed inside him. At that moment, he strongly sensed that a world completely different from what he had known about was about to unfold. Sitting on a chair in the garden, a pink-haired woman suddenly goes to Charlotte, asking if she did enjoy the festival. There's a hint of a malicious smile on her face, as if she's teasing Charlotte that what she experienced seems to be the honeymoon phase, which made Charlotte's face turn red. Suddenly, Theo and Danny run towards them. Danny immediately hugs the pink-haired woman, revealed to be his mom. Theo sees this, which makes him gloomy. It's as if he's jealous and wants to be with his mom. He sprints towards Charlotte and hugs her instead. While tucking Theo to bed, Charlotte notices that he's not in his very nice mood, so she offers to read him some stories before he sleeps. However, the story is about a mommy rabbit and a baby rabbit, which made Theo cry so hard. At first, she thinks that it's because of the story, but then Theo looks at her and asks why Danny has a mommy and he has none. Why can't Charlotte just be his mommy? With a heavy heart, she looks at Theo and asks if he wants to see his mommy. Poor baby, he only wants to experience the love of a mom. In front of the family portrait, Charlotte looks at Theo and tells him that the woman with blonde hair in the picture is his mom. Theo is surprised. This is the very first time he sees that portrait. He looks at Charlotte, wondering where his mom is now, and Charlotte explains that when he was still a baby, he had to say goodbye to his mother. He may not see his mommy now, but she loves him very much. Theo's eyes watered as he hugs Charlotte and cries. Looking at the portrait, Charlotte wonders why there's a huge space beside Carlisle's seat. She tries to touch it, and a beam of light appears, and all of a sudden, a boy who looks exactly like Carlisle appears beside him in the portrait. Suddenly, Theo says that the pendant the boy is wearing is the exact pendant that Carlisle gave him. Charlotte looks at Theo's pendant. Edgar Heinst is written on there. She remembers who that person is. He's Carlisle's twin who died 16 years ago. While tucking Theo to bed, he suddenly looks at Charlotte with a smile on his face, telling her that he's not sad about not seeing his mommy anymore. Instead, he's happy now because he has both Charlotte and Carlisle. In the hallway, Charlotte can't stop thinking about the boy in the portrait. He was definitely Edgar Heinst. In the novel, Edgar Heinst died when he was young. It was because Marquess Patreon mistakenly thought Edgar was Carlisle. The Marquess wanted to kill Carlisle because he was a Rosetto, but ended up killing Edgar by mistake. When the truth of the incident was revealed, House Patreon was destroyed. But the real problem was Carlisle, who managed to escape death. He knew that Edgar died because of him. The guilt and sadness he felt made his mana run wild. In order to save him, the former Duke and Duchess chose to erase his memory, so that he couldn't remember that he was a Rosetto or that Edgar died. The story of Edgar isn't something that Charlotte should get involved with, but there's something about the portrait that she should tell him. She can't be a bystander anymore. Carlisle has been honest with her, and she should too. She can't be his real fiancé, but she can be his friend. Inside the room, Carlisle's looking at Charlotte, who is sitting in front of him. He wonders what she wants to talk about during this late hour. Finally, she looks at him and tells him that she showed Theo the portrait. Theo missed his mother dearly, and she only wanted to show it to the boy for him to be happy. There's a hint of silence. Charlotte completely thought that Carlisle was going to be frantic about that, but instead he just asks her if Theo liked it, which he really did. As she gets up, she lets him know that Theo missed his mother a lot. But before she can leave, Carlisle thanked her for taking such good care of Theo. As she exits his room, she still can't tell everything that he should know, like about his twin brother Edgar. She knows that hiding it will make things worse, but she doesn't think she'll ever be able to say it. In Theo's bedroom, Carlisle's looking at his sleeping face, thinking about what Charlotte just said. Theo missed his mom, and Carlisle didn't tell him about it because he didn't want him to get hurt. But it turns out that that's just an excuse. He was avoiding it because he didn't have the courage. He was being a coward. All of a sudden, Theo wakes up. Carlisle apologizes for waking him up, but Theo gives him a smile, saying that it's all right since he wasn't able to see him during dinner. They talk about how Theo sees their mother and if he missed him, in which he did, but Theo thinks that he's all right now because he has Carlisle and Charlotte. With his affinity for the two in mind, Theo looks at Carlisle asking if they're going to live together for a long time. Carlisle is taken aback, but then smiles and pats Theo's head, telling him that the three of them are going to live together. After giving that silly answer to Theo, he thought that maybe all the things that he told him are the things that he wishes for himself. Maybe he is hoping that the woman who handed him the handkerchief would warmly embrace his and Theo's loneliness. The next morning, the butler introduces someone to Charlotte. It was Rolando, the mage of the house Heinst. He's the one who sealed Carlisle's mana and erased his memories. He asks Charlotte for help regarding Theo since he has to check his mana. They walk towards the sofa, though Charlotte has a bad feeling about this. In the novel, Rolando seems to be loyal towards Carlisle. Theo's still afraid of him and refuses to hand his hands to Rolando, but when Rolando mentions chocolate, Theo immediately cooperates. Suddenly, there's a huge flow of energy. Charlotte can even feel it inside her. Is it because she saved Theo? All of a sudden, Rolando grabs her hands, making Charlotte scared and confused of what he's doing. Is he putting a spell on her? Oh, is he really a character to be trusted or not? Charlotte feels a warm energy flowing inside her as she grabs her arms away from Rolando. Suddenly, the butler shows up, asking her what she saw inside the portrait room. She knows that they are testing her because she saw something she shouldn't have. She looks at them and smiles, saying that she saw the portrait of the late Duke and his wife as well as Carlisle. They tried to ask if she saw something more, but then she looks at them and acts as if she knows nothing. In the end, both of them left. She turns around to wake Theo up, and when he does, she tries to ask if he saw someone beside Carlisle in the portrait. But strangely, he doesn't remember. But how come she does? Could it be because of the energy she felt inside of her? She should ask another mage about it. Inside the room, Charlotte is talking to a mage about the magic that she's been feeling, and that it must be a nullification magic. So the mage tries to get her to nullify the fire, and Charlotte tries to feel the energy within her, and puts her hand on the fire, but it does nothing. This disappoints her, but the mage laughs it out, telling her that they should just practice it. During dinner, Charlotte seems to be in a bad mood, enough that Theo and Carlisle notice this too. So Theo looks at her and asks her to go with him and Carlisle to look at the portrait in hopes that it will lift her mood. But Charlotte's worried that Carlisle might not yet be ready to confront his mother, though it surprised her that he agrees to it. However, when they entered the room, Carlisle remains standing by the door. He seems unready to see the portrait, so she walks at him and tells him not to rush it if he's not yet ready. Some wounds take a while to heal, and rushing the healing might make it worse. So she assures him that he doesn't have to force himself to heal or act brave. It genuinely worries her that it might get worse. Suddenly, Carlisle looks closely at her, and right now there seems to be only an inch of gap in their faces. He stares at her softly in the eyes as he tells her that he'll be okay, as long as she's beside him. Seeing Carlisle walk towards Theo to look at the portrait somehow warms her heart. This is a meeting that she thought would never happen. He may have been smiling faintly, but it already shows that the wound in his heart is healing little by little. He seems relieved. It's as if he realized that his efforts to forget his mother up until now were pointless, but he seems happy to see members of the family that he has forgotten. But someone is still left on the other side of his memories. That person still sits on the other side, alone and forgotten, just like he has all this time. And that person is none other than poor Edgar, dead, all alone and completely forgotten. Ordinary days pass by. Charlotte practiced the nullification magic with Sir Ein the mage, without much success. Sir Ein told her to wish for it earnestly, but it was hard to grasp. Meanwhile, after the past few days, Theo went to see the portrait every day. Regardless, Robert continues to keep an eye on Charlotte. It looked like he was checking to see if she remembers anything. The days were peaceful, but there was tension in the air, and soon, the martial arts competition is around the corner. In the living room, Jake's grumbling in front of Charlotte, wanting her to attend their martial arts competition. Isaac agrees too, that it's better for her to go. At first, Her mind is set that she wouldn't be attending, but as soon as she hears that the priestess Therese will be there, she immediately agrees to go. She has to ask the priestess to help her with her magic. At dinner time, Carlisle notices Charlotte's discomfort. It was as if she had something to say to him, so he never asked her about it. Suddenly, she hands him an embroidered handkerchief, saying that even though he won't be participating in the competition, she still made him one. Carlisle appreciates what she gave him and thanks her for it. Suddenly, Charlotte opens up about asking Carlisle a favor if she can watch her brother's competition. She wants to go, but she's a bit worried for Theo. What if someone will harm him or if he'll get lost? Carlisle looks at her and tells her that she has nothing to be worried about. He will protect the both of them. She doesn't notice it, but she's completely acting like Theo's mother. How sweet. The day of the competition arrives and Theo's face is full of happiness seeing the crowd. He seems to be enjoying it, along with all of the people inside the arena. Looking at Theo and Charlotte, Carlisle feels a hint of happiness too, seeing the two of them enjoying themselves, especially Theo. However, as he's looking at the crowd, he sees a strange man wearing a hood wandering in the crowd. As they are watching the match, Charlotte notices Carlisle's discomfort. It's already Isaac's match when all of a sudden, Carlisle touches her shoulder, telling her to go to a safe place with Dame Celine. Just when they're about to head out, an explosion happens. All of the people inside are panicking as they run towards the exit. Theo looks so scared too, his eyes watering as he hugs Charlotte. Why is there an explosion? What is happening? They immediately run towards the door, but Celine can't open it, even with magic. Sir Ein tries to open it too, but he couldn't. It seems like the one who put a spell on it is much stronger than him. Carlisle has no other choice but to ask Sir Ein to use his teleportation magic, but it can only transport 2 people. Given that Sir Ein, together with Charlotte, Carlisle, and Theo, is 4 people, it will be hard. Carlisle asks to be left, so he says his goodbyes to Charlotte, making her think as if that will be the very last time they'll see each other. Suddenly, the moment the spell starts, she hands Theo to Sir Ein and the both of them disappear. Carlisle is surprised and a bit pissed as he wanted her to go with them. But Charlotte doesn't want to leave him, and saving Theo is more important. But then Carlisle looks at her and shouts that she's important for him too, so he'll do everything to protect her too. In spite of the moment, this could have been pretty sweet and romantic, but alas! All of a sudden, a huge flame of fire is heading towards the two of them, so Carlisle hugs her, trying to protect her from it. The moment she looks at him, Charlotte sees that he's very hurt, and there is blood on his forehead already. The guards around them are already on the ground, hurt from the sudden attack. Charlotte knows that she has to do something. She has to protect them, protect Carlisle. When a huge fireball is about to attack them again, she walks towards it and releases her magic. A huge ray of blue energy emerges, and suddenly the magic that was about to attack them disappears. Carlisle seems to be shocked with what just happened, but he is even more surprised to see Charlotte about to fall. A gentle touch awakens Charlotte, and she momentarily thinks it's Emma. As she opens her eyes, she sees the Duke looking down at her with concern. He assumes the priestess has already treated her. With teary eyes, she assures him that she's all right and asks about his safety after he dodged the magical fireball meant for her. He responds that her safety is his priority and pulls her into a reassuring hug. Shipper alert! The Duke's hug is definitely swoon-worthy. The Duke also mentions that the priestess has treated him and reassures Charlotte that everyone in the palace, especially her brothers and Theo, are safe. The priestess then enters the room, asking Charlotte if she's all right, while requesting to speak with her alone, gesturing to the Duke to leave. After the Duke leaves, the priestess inquires about the Martial Arts Association and wonders if something similar has happened before, specifically concerning nullifying magic, the act of turning magic into nothing. Charlotte exclaims that she doesn't know how to do that. The priestess suggests that it may have been the young lady's doing and solves the case. The priestess also asks if Charlotte remembers the String of Fate, which has 2 connected strings possessed by the young lady and is considered dangerous. Charlotte confirms she remembers it, and the priestess advises her to be cautious with it. Charlotte acknowledges the risk, stating she could die if she continues to use it, but she insists she would use it again if her brother Theo were in danger. Upon hearing Charlotte's resolve, the priestess simply remarks that she must be careful if she wishes to remain with her precious people. After the priestess leaves, Theo comes into her room and hugs her while Emma cries, worried for her well-being. Charlotte assures them she's fine and urges them to stop crying. Charlotte is surprised to learn from Emma that the Imperial Mage's intervention was crucial for her survival. She feels relieved that her unique ability remains a secret, which she will discover later. The secret's safe, for now, but can she keep it a secret for long, especially with the Imperial Mage involved? When Charlotte asks about Ane's whereabouts, Emma informs her that he is currently speaking with the Duke. The child adds that her brother is angry, further shocking Charlotte. Meanwhile, the Duke asks Ane if he used magic to open the door, though it didn't work. Ane does not deny it, but the Duke is unhappy with his response and demands the truth. Ane insists that he is innocent and did not deliberately avoid using magic. Ane adds that if the Duke doubts him, he will take the Lord's oath, which means that if he betrays the Lord, his heart will explode immediately. This leaves the Duke speechless. However, Duke suggests that if Ane is not responsible, there could be another wizard involved that they don't know about and advises him to leave the room. Just as Ane walks out the door, the Duke's assistant arrives with information about who caused the incident. He hands the information to the Duke, who sees that it was Maurice Federo, the disciple of Roandro. Upon seeing it, the Duke is surprised that Federo, a brilliant wizard, is the suspect. His assistant adds that Federo's whereabouts are unknown. This prompts the Duke to decide to move to the mansion's manor as soon as possible. Meanwhile, Theo sleeps peacefully beside Charlotte. She assumes he must be exhausted from taking care of her. She is surprised when he dreams of her leaving him, and she reassures him that she won't go anywhere. A while later, the Duke enters Charlotte's room and asks if she's all right, having worried about her all day. Seeing her improved condition, he is relieved and shares his plan to move to the Heinz mansion, her manor, for its superior magical protections. The Duke apologizes, feeling guilty about the recent raid. He adds that the stranger who targeted Theo claimed it was because of him holding grudges. Seeing him so vulnerable, Charlotte insists it's not his fault since he saved her, and urges him not to blame himself. His cheeks flush red, and Charlotte asks if he's feeling sick. Is it just Charlotte's kindness that's flustering him, or is there something else going on? The Duke assures Charlotte that he is fine and advises her to take better care of herself, which she insists she's doing. Their conversation turns into a playful argument, with Charlotte accusing him of mocking her moves, which he denies. They stop when they hear Theo's latest episode of sleep talking. Afterward, Charlotte gazes into the mirror, reflecting on Ane's earlier words. She recalls his explanation about her magic, which blocks mana and invalidates other magic. She realizes that Ane is the right person to help her understand and validate her own magical abilities. Which, in fact, all of this makes sense because she recalled the time when she shut down Roandro's mana calmly. Charlotte comes to her senses when Emma calls her, telling her that she is set to leave. She just thinks that she can find out more about it in the Heinz mansion. Charlotte steps outside to find Theo and the Duke waiting for her. The Duke asks her if she has said goodbye to her brothers, and she confirms she did so the night before. She even considers him kind for showing concern for her brother. They then decide to leave and head to Heinz mansion. When they arrive at the mansion, Charlotte is awestruck by its extravagance. The Duke playfully teases her about her amazement at the beautiful surroundings, which leads Theo to scold him for laughing at his sister. Not long after, Roandro welcomes them and wishes them well during their stay. He is pleased to have Charlotte with them. She mentions it's not their first meeting, though she doesn't specify when. Roandro recalls meeting her when a special portrait was on display. She corrects him, saying it was actually during Theo's physical examination, which he claims he forgot. However, the Duke is displeased with Roandro's response and hopes he won't have to answer like that further. This prompts Roandro to ask if the Duke has something to say. The Duke then demands that Charlotte take Theo to his room. Is there some unspoken conflict brewing? This scene is thick with suspicion. Once Charlotte and Theo leave, the Duke asks Roandro if he can spare a moment. He inquires about Morris's whereabouts, prompting Roandro to question why he is looking for the boy. The Duke insists on the truth, reminding Roandro that the Lord's oath is engraved in him. Roandro explains that Morris is searching for a suitable person. When asked if Roandro instructed Morris to do this, he replies that it was just a precaution since Heather couldn't have anticipated how things would turn out. He also mentions that Morris acted on the late Duke's orders without expecting the current outcome. Upon hearing this, she recalls her father's mistrust of Roandro and notes the absence of any report involving Morris. Later on, Roandro reveals the truth about the report concerning Morris's location, because he is worried that Theo may reveal his identity as Roseto while the Duke reports something. The Duke then demands action and calls Morris to confirm something. Meanwhile, Morris is walking at the church, speaking to himself about why Roandro wants to talk to him again. He stops when he sees Theo and Charlotte in the garden inside the mansion, and assumes Charlotte is the new tutor. Theo notices him and asks who he is, to which Morris responds, introducing himself with pleasure. What's got him so worried about Roandro wanting to chat? Upon introducing himself, Theo gets scared and hides behind Charlotte's skirt. She asks if he knows Ane, but Morris neglects her question as he becomes captivated by her beauty, concluding she's the prettiest woman he has ever met. He grabs her hand and asks if they can be friends. Meanwhile, Charlotte is shocked by Morris's request. When Theo hears it, he intervenes, calling Morris a bad guy. Morris defends himself but bumps into the Duke. He pays his respects and welcomes the Duke to the mansion, but he becomes scared when he sees the Duke's face darken. Uh-oh, looks like Morris just stirred the pot of trouble. Ruandro interrupts the tense situation and introduces Charlotte as the Duke's fiancée. Morris, surprised to learn about the engagement, feels embarrassed about his earlier actions. When the Duke says Morris needs to come with him, Morris feels a lot of embarrassment. Afterwards, at the table, the Duke asks if Morris went to the capital a week ago, which Morris denies. The Duke mentions that a martial arts competition took place a week ago, but a raid happened, shocking Morris. The Duke says they need to find the person behind the raid, and Morris agrees. However, the Duke looks at Morris and says he already found the culprit and plans to execute him. Morris understands that the Duke suspects him and kneels, insisting it isn't him, but the Duke doesn't believe him. Whoa, hold on! This scene just took a dark turn! Morris explains that he goes to the Dallas estate to find a suitable person as instructed. He adds that his trail should not be disclosed by his master and looks to his master for help. The Duke throws a magical box enchanted by Ain to test Morris. If Morris can open it, proving he matches Ain's power, he is the guy and will pay with his life. Morris tries but fails to open the box, insisting he isn't the guy. Ruandro suggests that if the Duke still has doubts, Morris should take the Lord's oath. Exhausted, the Duke says it's unnecessary and they should leave. Morris feels thankful his life is spared. However, as they are about to leave, the Duke decides Morris shall stay with him. He asks about Morris's search, and Morris says he hasn't found a suitable person yet. He adds that the suitable person has already experienced death, which stops breathing, and the Duke concludes he experienced the same. Morris also mentions that he isn't the only one searching for someone who almost died. There is someone else looking for the suitable person, which the Duke finds hard to believe. Upon hearing this, the Duke suspects there might be another Roseto. Morris says he plans to investigate, but is requested to return to the mansion. Morris tells the Duke about Penelope O'Hen, who nearly died 7 years ago. The Duke concludes she might be the suitable person and instructs Morris to investigate further. Before Morris leaves, the Duke warns him not to appear before Charlotte if he values his life. Scared, Morris agrees and departs. As Morris leaves, the Duke feels a sharp pain in his heart, as if thorns are piercing him. He then remembers that the anniversary of his mother's death is approaching. At the dining table, Charlotte and Theo wait for the Duke, who still skips his meals. Theo assumes the Duke no longer wants to eat with him, but she suggests he might be busy. A knock interrupts them. It's Emma, explaining that the Duke is skipping meals because his mother's death anniversary is approaching. Upon hearing this, she decides they will eat with him to ensure he has a proper meal. In the Duke's room, all the food from the dining table is transferred there. Charlotte points out that he's not eating, and Theo also wants to eat with him. When Theo asks if they should start eating, the Duke says he's not hungry. Theo wonders why he's not hungry, as the Duke is skipping meals, which Charlotte agrees with. She thinks of a strategy to get him to eat. She decides not to eat if he doesn't. She also calls him a friend, which shocks the Duke. As Charlotte continues with her plan, the Duke finally picks up his utensils and starts eating, making Theo happy. They enjoy their meal, but the Duke reflects on her comment about being friends and questions their relationship status. He also ponders what she thinks of him. The tension is definitely building, and we're dying to know what happens next. Theo's meal is interrupted by rain and thunder, which scares him. Charlotte feels sad because her efforts to change the atmosphere are futile due to the rain. The Duke's mother's death anniversary is being commemorated, and despite the rain, everyone at the mansion attends the ceremony. Charlotte feels pity for him, recognizing his fragility and vulnerability since his mother's passing 2 years ago. Charlotte asks Theo to accompany Emma while she stays by the Duke's side, which he agrees to. She approaches the Duke, thinking he needs support and wants to offer him strength during this difficult time. Charlotte stays by the Duke's side even though it's raining. Although she doesn't know what to say or how to comfort him, she feels like he's holding back his tears despite the pain. Bravely, he tells her to stay with Theo since it's heavily raining. However, he is surprised when he hears her sobbing and lies that something flew into her eyes. Charlotte sticking by the Duke in the rain is incredibly heartfelt. Gently, Charlotte says that everything will be all right, though it would take time. She then tells him she understands that rainy days can be painful and that no one can blame him for feeling sad. Moreover, she adds that it's all right to cry and there's no shame in it. Without hesitation, Duke leans on Charlotte and starts to pour his heart out and hugs her. They're like that for a moment under the rain. After the somber moment, they sit in silence, neither daring to speak. They keep glancing at each other, but when their eyes meet, Charlotte quickly looks away. Finally, the Duke thanks her, and she responds that it's nothing because it's normal for friends to support each other. The Duke then asks if she truly thinks they're just friends. Charlotte hesitates, then apologizes, explaining that she thought they were friends since the martial arts competition. Before she can finish her explanation, the Duke takes her hand and places it on his chest. He asks if she wants to reconsider their relationship, suggesting they might be more than just friends. With that, she can't even utter any words. Wow, her hand on the Duke's chest? That's bold! Charlotte's totally stunned. She can't even react. After their moment the other day, Charlotte sits in her room, blushing as she thinks about what happened. She can't help but marvel at how perfect the Duke's voice is. However, she quickly snaps back to her senses, realizing it's not the right time for such thoughts. She needs to create a magic stone as soon as possible and must not be distracted. Despite her efforts, she can't help but remember how warm the Duke's arm was, even in the rain. She also thinks about his body being sealed with mana, noting that the original story states the seal breaks upon Theo's death. However, she finds it strange that he wants to break the seal while Theo is still alive. Exhausted from pondering the reasons, she refocuses on creating the magic stone because he needs it. Unlike the original story, Penelope is no longer with her and she must make the magic stone herself. Charlotte starts to create the magic stone. She concentrates as much as possible, but just as it's about to be done, the mana vanishes. Disappointed in herself, she reflects on her lack of improvement despite her practice. She hears the door open and sees Theo, who immediately hugs her. She asks if he's been taking care of the garden, but he doesn't respond. Charlotte senses that he might be lying, so Theo eventually says he is taking care of it. Then he reveals he has an inquiry for her, so the boy eagerly asks what she wants besides him. Charlotte, in response, says she wants yellow flowers that bloom in Rania, her favorite. Theo asks if it's the flower embroidered on her handkerchief, and she confirms it. Excitedly, he walks out of the room. Watching him leave, she thinks about how he's been asking random questions these past few days. Oh, how sweet! Yellow flowers from her favorite place? It's clear someone has a soft spot for meaningful gestures. After Theo leaves, Charlotte examines her hands and contemplates how to create a magic stone. She decides to seek help and resolves to find someone who can assist her, wondering why she hadn't thought of it sooner. She heads to the garden and finds Morris, asking if he can listen to her. However, remembering the Duke's warning, Morris insistently tells her not to come near him. As he tries to run away, he trips and falls. Charlotte asks if Morris is alright, and he questions why she needs to approach him. And so, she explains that he is the only one who can help her. Curious, Morris asks what kind of help she needs. After Charlotte convinces Morris, they sit down to discuss how she can work on her magic. He explains that magic will flow from her fingertips. When he's about to mention another method, he recalls the Duke's dark expression, which gives him chills. The Duke will surely freak out knowing this. Morris warns that if he helps her, he will have to hold her hand, and if the Duke finds out, he will be executed. Charlotte laughs at his explanation, saying that the Duke wouldn't do such a thing. Despite Morris's reluctance, she insists and grabs his hand, asking how to perform the magic. Morris fears the Duke might see them. Charlotte begs him again, asking for his help for the Duke's sake and promising to keep it a secret from the Duke. Surprised by her willingness to learn, Morris confirms that if she truly keeps it a secret, he will help. As Morris begins to teach Charlotte, a shadow lurks in the bushes, revealing itself to be Theo's. Theo is likely going to report this to the Duke. And just like that, Theo rushes to the Duke's room, visibly agitated. When the Duke asks what's wrong, Theo reveals that Morris is holding Charlotte's hand. This could lead to serious trouble for Morris. Theo angrily enters Carlisle's office, telling him about what he saw. Morris grabbing Charlotte's hands. Carlisle seems confused about who the mage is, but when Theo said that he has snowy hair, he immediately knows who it is. He seems baffled by the fact that Morris ignored his warning, but come to think of it, it's not just Morris. He knew that Sir Ian's giving Charlotte some magic lessons too, and he has to do something about it. Charlotte is in the room with Sir Ian practicing her magic, but still it seems like it's not doing very well. She still can't perform it perfectly. Suddenly, Carlisle arrives. This is already a cue for Sir Ian to leave, but the moment he leaves, Carlisle slams the door, making Charlotte think that she did something wrong. They are walking towards the greenhouse, and by the moment they open the door, the place is filled with yellow flowers. Charlotte's favorite flowers. Shock is evident on her face. Her eyes widened as tears slowly fill it. Those are tears of gratitude. That's so sweet. But there's still one thing that Carlisle wants to give her. He shows her a box and opens it. There's a ring inside of it. He looks at her and confesses his feelings. Regardless of how it started, he already knows how he feels. It became clear to him the moment she told him that everything will be all right. Those words might be common, but for him, it is special. He never heard those words from anyone, and he didn't know that he needed it either. Not until she said those words to him. Unbearable days might come ahead of him, but it will be okay if she stays by his side. The man is really in love. However, those confessions turn upside down the moment Charlotte refuses to receive the ring. For her, she's not the right person for him. She apologizes, saying that someone else should have been there instead of her, and that it's better for her to stay as his friend, a friend who can help him get through the hard times. We all know she likes him too, but why? What's stopping her? Carlisle calmly asks her if she needs more time, since it seems like she still needs some to realize that she's the perfect partner for him. He hands her the box and tells her that he can wait. He can wait for as long as he has to. The mansion is so busy. A lot of servants are going back and forth to finish up the place, while Charlotte is also making sure that all is perfect. Wonder why they are so busy? It's because it's Theo's birthday. Suddenly, someone touches Charlotte that shocked her. It's Irina with her son Danny. They arrive there as a surprise for Theo. Suddenly, Theo enters the room looking for his surprise. He's even more surprised to see Danny. Their faces immediately lit up just by seeing each other. In the greenhouse, Irina and Charlotte are sitting on the chairs while watching the kids when suddenly Irina notices the yellow flowers and asks if those are the flowers embroidered in Charlotte's handkerchief. And yes, it is. Charlotte tells her that it's Carlisle's surprise for her since he knows that she misses her hometown. Irina also notices the engagement ring. She then tells her that those blue diamonds are really hard to find. That must be why Carlisle gave it to her late. Then it hits Charlotte. This must be the reason why he told her to still wear it, to avoid outsiders from saying something about their relationship. If there's no ring, questions will surely arise. Ever since that day, Charlotte never really met Carlisle properly. It makes her feel confused since he says those things but never showed up in the mansion again. But isn't it her who rejected him? Her face is all red thinking about it. She's so confused with her behavior, even Irina notices it, but she just explained that she's stressed because it's Theo's birthday. Oh no, with that face, it's pretty obvious that she's stressed because of other reasons. The blowing of candles is already finished. Now it's time for Theo to open his gifts. When he opens Charlotte's gift, his face lights up when he realizes that it's the bear Toto from the book he likes the most. Suddenly, the door opens and Carlisle enters. He looks at Charlotte and greets her. She greets him back, but it seems like she can't look at him directly. However, by the moment he sees the ring on her fingers, a hint of a smile appears on his face. Theo immediately runs towards Carlisle and tells him about the Toto that he got from Charlotte. He hurriedly grabs his birthday present from Carlisle, and by the moment he opens it, it is the exact gift that he also got from Charlotte. Carlisle thought that Theo would be disappointed, but instead, the young boy is so happy as he runs towards his friend Danny to show him the gifts. He's such a cute and appreciative boy. Looking at the people enjoying their party, she should be happy, right? But for some unknown reason, Charlotte feels lonely. She walks, planning to go get some fresh air, when all of a sudden she loses her balance. Luckily, someone holds her waist, preventing her from falling. By the moment she looks at the person, she sees those two familiar eyes looking at her. It's Carlisle. Her cheeks reddened. She doesn't know what to say. She feels embarrassed with what just happened. Carlisle asks her to go get some fresh air since it seems like she had too much wine, in which she agrees since that's what she actually planned. However, the moment she tries to leave, he grabs her hand. He wants to go with her too. She tries to reason out that she can do it all alone, but the man refuses. Instead, he gets closer to her and slowly says that he can give her enough time, but he lets go of her hand and that he will do everything for her. Carlisle's offering his hand to Charlotte, but it seems like the young lady is torn between going alone or not. She wanted to go alone, but she can't just leave Carlisle there who's offering his hand. For sure it will stir up some rumors on the guests. At the balcony looking at the sea, Carlisle notices Charlotte who seemed to be having some deep thoughts. He asks what she's thinking. Charlotte shares how she remembers her birthday and the seaweed soup her mother makes for her on her birthday. She expresses how she misses her so much, and if only she knew that her last birthday was the very last time she would see her, she should have treasured that moment. Seeing Charlotte sad breaks his heart into pieces too, so Carlisle walks towards her and hugs her tightly. He didn't know that she's been feeling this way, and hugging her is the least he can do at that moment. It's already morning. The moment Charlotte opens her eyes, she is quite surprised since she's already in her room, and she doesn't remember going in her room last night. Suddenly, someone called her, telling her that her family is here. It surprised her. She hurriedly opens the door and sees her brothers Isaac and Jake together with her parents. In the living room, Charlotte is there together with her parents, brothers, and Theo. She asks her mother why they came. It turns out that Carlisle sent someone last night and personally arranged some carriages to bring them to the mansion. She is surprised that Carlisle did it. It must be because of what she said last night. He really didn't lie when he said that he'll do anything for Charlotte. Her mother touches her hand and looks at her softly, saying that she was worried because of how things went by so fast, especially the engagement. But her concerns vanish seeing Charlotte well. She assures her dad, too, that she's all right, and her injuries during the martial arts competitions were all healed. Her family, including her brothers, feel at ease seeing how well she's doing. Suddenly, Carlisle enters the room, but seeing that they're in the middle of a conversation, he excused himself. Charlotte follows him and expresses her gratitude for the flowers and for bringing her family to the mansion. He looks at her gently in the eyes as he tells her that he'll always be willing to do anything to the best of his ability if it's for her. And then he gets close to her as he smiles and tells her to just stay for as long as possible. Stay as long as possible. After hearing those words from him, there is no way she can leave. Charlotte's family stays for a week, to the point where she feels like that is her own home, where she feels like she has another family. On her way to sleep, she notices someone hiding behind her door. It's Theo. Theo immediately runs towards her and hugs her, telling her that he's afraid of the long thunder. She calms him down and puts him to sleep when she notices someone else knocking at her door. Charlotte's about to open the door, but then Theo stops her, saying that it's a ghost. Suddenly, she feels a cold air passing by, but shrugs it off, thinking that it's all because of the weather. She calms Theo down, telling him that it's all okay and nothing bad will happen as she proceeds to the door. When she's about to open it, she hears someone calling her name. It's Carlisle. She confirms it the moment she opens it and sees Carlisle standing. All of a sudden, Theo shouts out of fear and covers himself with a blanket. Charlotte walks towards him and calms him down. While Carlisle is looking at them, suddenly he accidentally looks at her chest, making his cheeks blush. He immediately excuses himself, but Theo stops him, asking him to sleep with them, and this leaves him no choice since his brother seems to be crying out of fear. Lying on the bed, Theo is already asleep while the both of them are still awake. He asks her if she saw her family off, in which she answered yes, and thanked him once again for what he did. Since Theo is already asleep, he sits up and is about to stand, but suddenly loses his balance the moment Theo unknowingly grabs his shirt. Now he's accidentally on top of Charlotte with very little gap from her face. They both look shocked, their cheeks redden, realizing the position they're in. Suddenly, Carlisle gets more and more closer to her, wanting to kiss her, but he stops the moment he realizes what he's doing. He immediately stands up and exits the room, leaving Charlotte surprised, embarrassed, and confused about what just happened. Oh my god, I was rooting for that kiss! He should have done that! The next morning in Carlisle's office, Carlisle scratches his forehead. He seems to be so bothered by what he did yesterday. He regrets it, even promises himself to not act hastily ever again. His butler even notices it and asks, but Carlisle shifts the topic and asks if they found out who's the person behind what happened in the martial arts competition incident. However, the butler informs him that they are doing their best to find any news about the man behind the martial arts competition incident, but they got nothing yet. This stresses Carlisle out. In that empire, it's almost impossible to avoid the intelligence experts. Who might it be? And for what reason are they targeting Theo? Meanwhile, under a tunnel, a man is pleading for forgiveness from a strange hooded man, asking for one more chance, saying that after the martial arts competition, their target moved. That's why there's nothing else he could do. The hooded man laughs. He finds his explanation funny as he asks the man if the real reason why he can't do it is because he feels uncomfortable killing a child. The man explains that the mansion that Theo is in is filled with ancient magic. That's why physical and magical attacks have no counter effect at all. The hooded man laughs and stomps on the man's hand as he wields out a sword and attacks him with it. He looks at his other servants while he's wiping the blood from his sword as he tells them about their plan on sending someone inside instead of waiting for Theo to be outside. In the room with Sir Ein, Charlotte's still worried about her magic powers. It's always stuck in the same place. If the magic stone begins to take shape, it will break immediately. Sir Ein also doesn't know what's going on very well. Without the ability to create a magic stone, it would be impossible to create its original form. However, her magic stone already has a shape, so maybe it has something to do with Charlotte's mana personality. A normal mana that leaves the body will take the form of a magic stone. However, her mana isn't made with magic stones. They are only used to calm mana. Therefore, the process to make a magic stone seems to be different from normal. In other words, to complete the making of her magic stone, other conditions seem to be needed. Like there's some sort of secret ingredients that they should have. This made her think about the original work, wherein Penelope didn't need some sort of special ingredients or situation in making the magic stones. Penelope just managed the mansion and spent time with Carlisle. She did the same thing. After all, what might be the conditions for her to be able to create a magic stone? In the end, Sir Ein asks her to go to Carlisle's study and look for some sort of ancient book that might help her with her situation. In the library, Carlisle hands her a book about magic when all of a sudden their hands accidentally touch each other. Instantly, their cheeks turn red. That's the very first time they see each other after the incident. Well, that's pretty awkward. She excuses herself, but before she can even exit the room, Carlisle asks her what the book is for. She looks at him to explain that she's making a magic stone for him and Theo and that the book might be a help for her. Suddenly, Carlisle shares to her about the information that he got from Morris, that there are people who are looking for a suitable person. The man has blue eyes and blonde hair, so he warns her to stay away from that man if she ever sees them. Meanwhile, as they are talking, someone is watching them from the outside. It's a black cat, and it heard them also talking about Theo, who is peacefully sleeping inside the room. The cat immediately runs towards the bedroom window to look for the young Theo. Theo wakes up, and as he roams his eyes around the room, he sees a cute black cat outside the window. He cutely runs towards it, his eyes filled with so much excitement seeing the cat. The moment he gets closer to it, he asks the cat where its mom is. The cat just gives him a sad expression, telling him that it lost its mom. The cat is clearly playing with Theo's weakness, knowing that the kid already lost both of his parents. When Theo hears it, he instantly becomes determined to find the mother of the cat. Despite knowing that his brother won't allow him to open his bedroom windows, still, he'll do it to help the cat, thinking that it's fine to close it and open it once again. When the cat enters, it immediately jumps and hugs Theo, making the little boy so happy. However, Theo notices a necklace on the cat's neck. There's a red stone there, too. He touches it, and in an instant, a red mana is being released from it, filling the entire room with so much mana. Meanwhile, in Carlisle's room, in the middle of his conversation with Charlotte, they hear a crash from Theo's room. Instantly, they run out of their room, dashing towards Theo's room. As they arrive outside Theo's room, they see servants and Sir Ein outside. They are all hysterical and are panicking since they can't enter his room. It seems like there's a strong magic that is preventing them from going in. Even Carlisle can't open it. He tries, but his hands burn whenever he touches the doorknob. Desperately wanting to save Theo, Charlotte offers to open the door using her magic. She concentrates her mana on her hand, and by the moment she pulls the doorknob, it opens. Before they can even go in, Sir Ein casts a protective magic spell on them. However, by the moment they enter the room, it is filled with magic fire. And for them, it seems like that fire is the one made by Theo. Charlotte doesn't have the power to dispel it. Theo's mana is exploding. Charlotte knows that she still has to go in to help the young boy. Suddenly, she remembers what Priestess Teresa said. If she continues to use her power, her thread of destiny will be severed, so she has to be careful. But now seeing the young Theo suffering, she doesn't really care even if her thread of destiny is severed. She has to save him. Her mind is fixed. She tells them that she has to go in. She's the only one who can calm Theo. But before she can even go, Carlisle grabs her hand, wanting to go with her. Well, he really can't allow Charlotte to go on her own. Seeing the desperation in Carlisle's eyes, she knows that no matter how much she rejects his offer, he won't accept no for this. So she concentrates her mana to the both of them to protect them as they enter the room. They go inside the room and look for Theo everywhere when suddenly they hear someone calling out for them. It's Theo! He's sitting beside a small cabinet. Looking at his face, it's pretty obvious that he's scared. Tears are falling from his eyes as he looks at them clearly, begging for some help. Poor little Theo, he's experiencing so much danger in his life at a very young age.
So guys, what do you think of the story so far? Please subscribe and turn on notifications for updates on this and all our other stories so you can be the first to find out when they're out. Thank you so much for your support. See you in the next one.